So good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to just thank Evie for giving me the opportunity to speak today. As well as just explained, I work for Cornwall Insight Ireland. We opened an Irish office here a year ago, and we provide consultancy services as well as market intelligence, publications, and training in the market. And today I'm going to talk about a sort of a journey about the past, present, and future of subsidies in the SEM market. So if we look at in the old world, as we like to say, before ISEM, the route to market that people had in terms of renewables projects was reasonably straightforward in terms of refit projects. The refit subsidies provided a safe haven, a kind of a sense of guaranteed revenues and a clear path towards financing projects and in terms of getting financing and lending for them. And that worked really well under the old pool market that we used to have. But then before I get onto that, so we can see that the vast majority of the projects were wind projects, large-scale wind mainly, and then some small-scale wind projects as well. And we saw some sort of steady growth in those subsidies over time. But then when we got into 2018, obviously we had the ISEM project come in, and so that created a very different dynamic. We went from quite a stable and well understood system to suddenly having a totally new world open up to us. So the route to markets now came in the form of traded markets, for example. Balancing risk becomes a feature for developers, which hadn't really existed there before. And this created a whole new realm of activity around PPAs and around how financing of projects could occur. A big event last year was the announcement of the refit reference price changing under ISEM, which is dependent on either the day ahead or the day ahead and balancing prices. And a lot of the generators needed support then in terms of providing routes to market and the balancing risk around that. So if we look at the sort of prices that we've seen in ISEM so far since October 1st, so this is data from the 1st of October to the end of January, and the blue line is the day-ahead price in SEM, or ISEM. You can see that it's very much more volatile than the GB price, which is the red line there. Although the prices are tracking reasonably well, the volatility is definitely significantly higher. The pink dashed line is what the SMP price, or the old SEM price, would have been for the same period of time a year previously, and is significantly lower, maybe. And a lot of that has been driven by a combination of increase in gas prices and also forced outages, or unforced outages, over the initial period of SEM, of the new SEM. So when we look at what our average daily price is since that time, so it's averaging around, depending on what period of time you look at, 71 euros or 74 euros, it is significant that there is a difference. And if you look at the data that EirGrid and Sony publish, they would say that the market is operating exactly as it's expected, it is liquid, and that these prices are not atypical of what would have been expected. I suppose the question is, will we see this volatility continue? We would suspect not, but there then is the question is, when do we see that start to settle down? When do things start to become more predictable? And then in the world of the balancing market, obviously, everybody's heard about the price spikes in the balancing market. The highest one was 3,700. That occurred in a kind of a very short period of time on the 24th of January. The volatility combined with these price spikes kind of, highlights how important it is that risk management and the management of risk around, for example, your PPAs, in order to find your route to market is becoming, again, very, very prevalent in people's minds. So for a lot of those PPAs that were renegotiated, many of the off-takers were offering services in terms of their own experience, where they had experience trading in markets like this and are used to managing this kind of balancing. So we've seen some changes in behavior as well with this, in the sense of the lenders, for example. So lenders usually like to kind of lock into a long-term contract, and what we were starting to see was, lenders maybe being more open to the idea of more shorter-term commercial terms and conditions around balancing. We've seen benchmarking periods, so a lot of PPAs have a 12-month benchmarking period, which will probably be up for renegotiation in the coming summer. And this kind of reflects the fact that people don't want to lock in long-term necessarily until this balancing has settled down. Again, the question is, when will the balancing volatility settle down? I'm sure many of you are signed up for the emails that come in talking about the various pricing disputes that come in the balancing market. And, there have been quite a few. Some of them are system issues, and there are workarounds in place to try and fix that. Some are questions about participant behavior. Should there be bidding controls, for example, on high-priced bids in the market? And there's a lot of conversation and investigation going on at the moment in terms of how to manage this and how to predict when this will start to settle. So if we look at our new journey in SEM and we look at the world going forward, obviously where we want to get to is, oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. We want to get to here, which is our target, which is where we have our revenues for our projects, we can finance our projects, and we are meeting our renewables targets, which are ambitious and have become, it sounds like recently, are becoming even more ambitious. So how do we get there? So we had REFIT, but REFIT now is going away, unfortunately. And so what do we have in the future? So we have the new subsidy schemes, which is RES, and as the other speakers have already pointed out, there's a lot of uncertainty about RES in terms of timelines, in terms of design, implementation. There are questions about who will actually get the subsidy. Will it be the generator gets it, or will it be the off-taker, as is in the case in REFIT? And if we look at other types of routes to market, then there's the possibility as well of corporate PPAs, as discussed as well, subsidy-free projects. These are all the factors that we have to think about in the future of how we find our way to the treasure. Other factors that we have to consider also are things like price cannibalisation, which could present a hazard in the future, and how do we facilitate offshore wind into this mix? So if you compare the old world with the new world, it's a lot less straightforward, and there's a lot more uncertainty in that. So what is the future of financing for these projects? So in the past we had REFIT, which is now closed. Many of those projects now, some of them are kind of coming close to the end of their REFIT subsidy. So what are they going to do next? In some cases, they may decide to operate as a merchant plant and get into a PPA with an off-taker under that arrangement until their loan is paid off, and then they may make decisions about whether they want to repower or look at life extension, for example. In terms of RES, there are a lot of restrictions or rules starting to come in already or have been suggested in terms of needing planning permission, grid connection offers, what kind of technology are we going to have and what kind of volumes and prices. And these are all of concern to participants in the market. And again, I think the point that's been made as well is that a little thing can set off a big effect. We're trying to juggle a lot of timelines and risk here. So clarity is really, really important, and the sooner the better. And then in terms of subsidy-free and corporate PPAs, so an emerging market, for example, in GB would be kind of battery co-location with renewable assets that are existing. So if you have a grid connection, you could maybe put a battery in there as well. So this is something that people, as we've talked to in our survey that we've done recently, would believe that this is going to happen, but as with so many of the things we're discussing is when are these things going to happen? And again, with the corporate PPAs, a big part of that is going to be around prices and where the risk lies. Also, when you look at a corporate PPA, it can be a complex, legal contract where you have not just two people, but you actually have three people in the mix, one of whom is actually not from the energy industry. So, there can be a lot of trying to get people up to speed on what it means and how to write those contracts, and they could be quite challenging. Some people are of the view that once we have a few of them under our belt, it'll set a precedent and then it'll become more normal. But again, when are we going to start seeing this? So in terms of corporate PPAs on the continent, so Wind Europe basically reported that we've had nearly 5 gigawatts of corporate PPAs signed since 2013. And again, there is a view of, can corporate PPAs fill the gap that we have between what we want to do and what we are being offered in terms of subsidies? And if not, where do we find those routes and how do we fill that gap? With corporate PPAs, it's probably the most pressing question is really about pricing. Are corporates going to offer competitive enough pricing to make that an attractive prospect for people? So, and the other side of that then is market entry and competition. So, with all of the activity that's changed in our journey past, before and through 2018, we've seen that at the moment, there are more than 20 off-takers who have at least 2 assets signed in PPAs. We have 7 large international companies who have experience trading in other markets, traded markets, so they're used to dealing with balancing risk, or they're able to hedge based on their trading activities outside of Ireland. And we've seen new entrants into the market offering new products, new types of PPAs, or bolt-on products that you can add on in terms of managing your balancing, for example. We also know of several entrants who are scoping the market quite actively as well, and we would expect to see an increase in competition in the future. So just a little bit about price cannibalization, because it's something that you probably hear about quite a bit, and David mentioned it earlier in his talk as well. And what this is. So price cannibalization is when the supply of renewables is basically increasing at a greater rate than your demand is, and it causes downward pressure on prices. It can be exacerbated markets that have a low increase in rate of demand, and you would see that in for example, Germany, that would have been observed. But in Ireland, we are looking at having an increase in our demand, certainly in the Republic of Ireland, in the future. So perhaps that'll offset that tendency. Subsidies can actually encourage price cannibalization because it can incentivize generators to be on when they don't need to be on, so that the market is oversupplied. And I suppose the question is, have we started seeing signs of this so far with the renewables that we have on the system? As I said before, the price that I quoted for the day-ahead price, which is like an average daily price, is about 74 euros. So, it looks okay so far. But we are seeing behavior where people are bidding in at zero prices. We've seen negative prices in the intraday market. And these activities tend to happen when there's a lot of wind in the system and there's low demand. So the question is, how would we see that evolve with our markets in the future? So in terms of future trends then, just to finish up, we would be seeing increased competition. We would expect to see more entrants, and we'd expect to see more kind of products, different types of emerging business structures, and again, a lot about risk and benefit. And I used to work in risk, and I used to always feel that, for every risk there is also an opportunity, but it depends on which side of it you're on and what are the decisions that you make in order to be able to capitalize on the benefit, but minimize that risk. We will probably be seeing, and we'll definitely be seeing, new and diverse technologies. We'll be seeing more solar, we'll be seeing hopefully offshore wind, new subsidy schemes coming down the road, and again, towards our targets and not being the laggard, as has been so many times quoted, the facilitation of renewables and how we make that happen in Ireland. So I just want to finish with this quote, is that it's the set of the sails, not the direction of the wind, that determines the way we will go. And with a lot of these factors that are coming down the road, we don't really have a lot of control about what's going to happen or how things are going to change. But we can start thinking about what we need to do and make the decisions that we set our sails in the right place, that it gets us to the treasure. Thank you.